And your question is, in a pro pipeline, when working with a model with several pieces, is it better to put all UVs on a single map? And like a lot of things in computer graphics, it depends on what you want to do. I know that I like to organize my larger scenes that include characters and props and environments. I do like to kind of isolate assets that belong together. So if a character is wearing separate object clothing, it has like a staff or some sort of sword or accessories, I usually like to put all of that together on one UV map and the environment on one or however many UV maps I need for a large scale environment. Props, everything that belongs to a certain prop on a UV map. I like to work that way, and I've used that in professional pipelines as well. That being said, one of these weird hobby things I do is I sometimes open up game models, like people who rip 3D models out of games. We'll post those online and you can look at them. And a lot of those characters are like split up into a bunch of different UV maps, like, 10 separate textures, separate UV mapped textures per diffuse channel kind of thing. So it just depends on the situation. I know for me, like my way of working my mind likes to kind of compartmentalize UVs of a character all together on one map. So I don't know. I hope that's slightly helpful. My recommendation, how I would do it, is put all of your character pieces on one map. The only reason maybe I wouldn't do that is if I wanted a very, very high resolution render. Like if someone contracted me to create a projected movie on like a museum wall, and so it needs to be super large, and then I need like really high fidelity detail, then maybe I would separate the different pieces so they all could have their own 8K texture kind of thing for maximum detail. But I don't know, it depends on the situation. I default to just putting them all on one UV space. And then from Matthew Ulray, will the ice texture that the snow sled is sitting on be part of today's lesson? Yeah, I think so. It's actually very simple to put together, so it's kind of an afterthought that I don't know, maybe ends up looking pretty cool. I will try to include that at the end because it doesn't really take that long. So with that said, let's see, 20-second. I've just timed it. There's more or less exactly a 20-second delay. Okay, not too bad. Thank you for testing that, Jake. I appreciate you doing that. But the assist, man, thank you guys, got my back. So 20 seconds is kind of normal. It's unfortunate, but I think it's standard across streaming things. A question from Pavel: Isn't UDIMs for such UDIMs? Oh, I'm not extremely. Let me see here. UDIMs. I know I've heard that term before. Let's see. UDIM textures. When was this? This is from 2014, so I should know about this pretty easily. Okay, looks like, what is UDIM? I've never heard of UDIM. I don't think, it looks like it is kind of an advanced format for UVs. I've never used them. I don't think they're included in Blender. But I know PTEX, we had high hopes of getting PTEX into Blender. But yeah, that's something I should definitely look into. Whoever asked the question, who did ask that question? Malholmesy, maybe look into the UDIM, do some Googling on UDIM UV space, or I guess it's just called UDIM. UDIM UV mapping, check that out maybe on Google, see what you can find there. But if it's not supported in Blender, I don't know if it's going to be relevant to you. All right, so yeah, last week we modeled this snow sled, and this week we're going to texture and shade it using Eevee, actually. I've really been working with Eevee, trying to get my mind around it, get familiar with it, see what works and what doesn't, especially for streaming, because you might remember if you were part of the vehicle class, that I tried to do Eevee and it was extremely slow. So I've avoided it since then, but I think I found a key setting that was making it extremely slow. So I'm going to try today and see if we can get a nice, smooth stream experience with Eevee. And if not, I might revert back to cycles, but I'm going to try Eevee. Let's see if I've missed any other questions. Looking for that bright blue tag, which I like. Let's see. Oh, that's right. Miranda, you were talking about you're in the Netherlands, so maybe that's why the stream was so slow, so laggy for you, so delayed. All right, cool. I don't see any other questions. That's awesome. Yeah, people in the pre-stream chat, we're definitely having fun with the question tag. Maybe it'll. I wonder if we can abuse it or not, but we'll see. So far, it's definitely not being abused. But I want you guys to ask your questions as you go, like usual. Oh, here's CG Cookie is about 30 seconds behind YouTube. Really? I feel like that shouldn't be a thing. I'm gonna have to test that out, Spiky XXX. I'm gonna have to check that out. All right, yeah, so we're talking about the snow sled. That's going to be the meat of today's stream. And then there is a couple things I think I want to talk about. Yeah, humongous new course was just launched, I believe this morning, if not within the last 24 hours, certainly. This is from Jonathan Lampell. He's been working on this for months. I mean, it's a massive project that he's been doing other stuff as well. That's why it's taken so long. But to record and produce this whole thing, it's been a long time coming. We've been excited about it for a long time. And it's finally here. So if you have not seen it, go check that out. If we just go to 3D Blender, yeah, so it's highlighted up here. I highly recommend watching it. It's like 21 lessons. I think it's 8 hours of content. Yeah, 8 hours of instruction. Yeah, this is what we call like a hero course, like a big one that takes all of our effort, our heart and soul to build this kind of thing. So check that out from Jonathan Lampell. It's great. He covers everything from modeling, texturing, shading, and I believe with Eevee, I'm pretty sure with Eevee, and rigging and animation as well. Like the door opens up and all its little parts move. So yeah, it's a really, really cool big course that was just launched. So that's a big deal. Congrats to Jonathan Lampell. As a fellow instructor, I empathize a lot with the kind of effort that went into this, especially over so many months, like maintaining that drive to get it done. So excellent stuff there. Also, someone else has mentioned it in the chat, but it's kind of coincidentally, the Blender Today live stream, which is on YouTube, it's run by Pablo Vasquez. So you have long-term Blender celebrity. He is running a live stream every week on Monday to talk about the latest updates to Blender development. So 2.8 has especially been like what he's talking about. And so what's nice for me, since I stream on Tuesday, is I can watch that, kind of keep my ear to the ground about what's going on with Blender development, and then pass along some highlights. And the big one from yesterday is that 2.8 Cycles has animation support for the stock denoiser. So Cycles has a built-in denoise function that is different from, I think there's like 2 other denoise add-ons that are floating around right now. One from Grant, who is Remington Graphics on YouTube. He's created at least one of them. He did the NVIDIA denoiser, and I think someone else, there's like an Intel denoiser, I think. But we're talking about the stock denoiser built in that just comes when you download Blender. And what's nice about the animation support, if you have tried rendering animations with Cycles, you know that noise is going to be a problem. If you look in the left image, and hopefully the compression's not bad, but on YouTube, you can see that there's especially high levels of noise down here in the sofa image, and that is just Cycles. If you to get rid of that naturally with Cycles, it's going to take forever to render. Your samples will have to be super high, and you'll be waiting probably, at least hours for that thing to render, sometimes days, and it's just really hard to get a super clean image. And the denoiser allows us to take that graininess and it calculates a smooth version. It smooths out that noise for you. However, when you do animation, that noise pattern, it's a splotchiness after the denoise often. And so that splotchiness, even though it might not be perceptible in a still frame, it definitely shows up in an animation. And you see that splotchy pattern kind of crawling all over the screen, and it's pretty annoying. But now we have animation support, which, as far as I know from what Pablo was saying, is it takes into the account the lighting and noise pattern from the previous frame and the frame after the current one that you're rendering to smooth out that pattern among the different frames. So that is pretty amazing. I render with Cycles a lot. Very excited for that feature to come in. So yeah, check out that stream too. It's on YouTube, the Blender Today channel, I believe. Check that out. There's always fun tidbits going on in there. And all right, so is there anything else? Okay, yeah, one more. Well, I'm trying to make it standard where we have like a fun little XP trivia quiz, section at the end of these streams. So that should be coming. Oh, it will. It will be coming, not should be coming. But with that said, we can get started. Now, I'm actually a little hot. Once we start live, I tend to get a little hot. So I'm going to take my pullover off real quick. Keep this thing, PG. So I do that off screen. That's a little bit better. Awesome. I also might be nursing this drink. Hope you guys don't mind. All right, let's dive into Blender and get to business. All right. Oh, yep. So that's a secret. We'll get to that in a bit. But let's open up the file from last week. That is in my live folder, Scene Flex Flyer 02. All right, so this is where we left off last week, and I'm not going to need that timeline. Just a straight up model. It's subdivision based, and I thought I would be UV texturing this thing, but actually I was able to achieve everything procedurally. That's kind of the thing nowadays is procedural textures, and I am way into it. It's so powerful, it's so flexible. And speaking of, are you guys paying attention to Simon? Let me see if I can find him. Let me see if I can find him, because he's doing insane things with Blender procedurally. Let me see if I can find Simon. Yeah, Lecty, I believe. Is this him? Oh, maybe it's not him. What is his name? Simon Thomas. Thomas. Yes, him. Oh, my word. If you guys are not paying attention, you should be. He is doing ridiculous things. Look at this. This is a procedural leaf. Procedural leaf. It's applied to a plane. This is crazy. This is substance level stuff. Yeah, Simon is brilliant. Miranda, you've been paying attention. Like, this is what's possible in Blender. And I've never seen anyone use it this way other than him. So to me, what this means is he is proving that Blender has the functionality to achieve substance-like results. But the UI, no one would deny that the user interface is far from substance. But the fact that the functionality is there is extremely exciting. It means that all that stands between us and substance functionality is a better UI. And I feel like that could come pretty easily since the functionality is already there. Pretty easily. I'm not a developer. It could be an ignorant statement. But I don't know. Maybe we'll see in a year some UI that makes stuff like this much more intuitive. But yeah, pay attention to Simon doing insane things. So anyway, that's why when you can do this, like, why even texture paint? That's kind of where I'm at. Of course, I don't even know how to go about building that, honestly. But all that to say is I'm really into the procedural future of texturing in Blender, and I'm going to follow that through in this stream. And specifically, the big takeaway I think you'll get is a procedural wood shader, procedural wood material, which is how we're going to start. Let's see here. Make sure I think I missed a question real quick. Aaron, yeah, you're asking a bit of a silly question here, but procedural textures are compatible with game engines, right? It's not a silly question at all, and no, they're not compatible. As in, I cannot, when I finish texturing the sled, I cannot take that, export it out in the raw format, and just open up in Unity or in Unreal, and all of the procedural goodies came along with it. I don't know if that will ever be. I don't know if that is ever going to be a thing. Never say never, I guess. But typically, even with Substance, you can't take out Substance procedural. As far as I know, you cannot take that stuff out and open it in Unreal. You have to bake it down to maps, to UV maps, in order to get that working in other software. I mean, surely that's not possible. But yeah, you need to. You can do that with Blender as well. Like that leaf example, you can bake that procedural leaf down to a UV texture space for that object, and then open that in a game engine. That's where the procedural stuff comes in handy, and that's how you export it. I want to check out this from Pavel, another procedural goodie. Yeah, look at that, like fish, actual fish, more substance practice. Building shapes. I mean, I don't even know how you go about that. That is nuts. Like, people are doing ridiculous things with procedurals. Full fish. Anyway, it's a crazy world, crazy time to be a CG artist. All right, let's think. What time is it? So yeah, it's been like 20 minutes of me blathering about. So let's actually get to work. The first material I'm going to create is going to be the wood material. This is, I think there's some nice nuggets to take away here, and I'm actually going to create it in another scene. So that's what I had opened accidentally. But we're just going to start from scratch, and the reason is I'm going to use the default cube, and I'm going to create a wood board. All right, so I'm tabbing into edit mode on the default cube. I'm going to scale in Y to get a thin board, and then scale in Z to make it a long board. All right. The reason I do this is it's intuitively a piece of wood that anyone can kind of relate to. And you know me, I always like to move it above the grid to treat it like a ground plane. So I've done that, and now I can begin actually building the shader for this. I'm going to split my window. Since it's a long upright shape, I'll just leave this right window for the rendering. Maybe turn off, no, not quite. I don't want to turn off overlays. So on the left, we'll make this our shader editor. And any questions I'm missing? Yeah, from David, are you familiar with bats in 2.8? I have heard of bats. Remind me what that is, David, real quick. If you can summarize just briefly. I've heard of it, but it's slipping my mind right now. Will there be separate tags for notice or something? Do you mean in the chat? I've already seen people asking if there's going to be like a statement tag, and that has definitely cropped up in the past before, but I don't know. I'd have to think about that. Since the functionality is there now for question, I'm sure it wouldn't be too difficult to add in other tags as they become useful. Oh, cool. I did not know that. So Paolo, you're saying that there is an Unreal plugin for Substance where you can work directly in Unreal Engine. That's wild. So it somehow ports all the procedural stuff over to Unreal. That's wild. I feel like that would be a ton of information to pass over straight to Unreal, but that's interesting. I'm gonna have to look into that. Bats is a promising. Oh, you're right. I remember it now. Is a promising layer-based PBR texturing add-on for 2.8. I have seen a blurb of news about that. I know that I was supporting the bpainter plugin for a while on Patreon. Andres Esau or something like that. I was supporting him for a while, but development seemed to have stopped for a while. I was really excited about that, but anyway, yeah, I think we're right on the verge with tools like bpainter and bats. Like, we're right on the verge of having some really legitimate like Substance-esque texture painting. I can feel it. Or it's whistling the Final Fantasy. Am I whistling the Final Fantasy victory theme? Omar, I have no clue what you're talking about. Okay, back to the wood procedural. What's very important, a key condition for the procedural to work correctly, is we're going to base it in reality, the way that a tree grows, right? So the reason I've created this plank the way I have vertically is because that's the way a tree grows, and that's the way planks are cut from a tree. And that means that my axis, if I turn on axes in the viewport display and axis, maybe go to wireframe. So you can see that the Z-axis is pointed straight up along the board, and that's going to be very important. If I tap into edit mode and rotate in Y 90 degrees, the Z-axis is facing in the width of the plank, and that's just not how a tree grows. That's not how people cut planks out of trees. That would imply that the tree, is shaped like this. Pardon my grease pencil art ability. Imagine these are the roots at the bottom, and the plank was cut out of the tree like this. That's not how it works. So it's important that the Z-axis faces along the length of your wood, your board. Let me turn off those annotations. So tab back into edit mode, rotate in Y 90 degrees. It's important to have the orientation aligned like this. I think I've said that enough, and that hopefully makes sense to everybody. All right, so I can turn my overlays off, and let's see. Eevee is by default the engine of choice in 2.8. So just to make sure, Eevee's right there. So shift or hit Z, hold Z, and then move my cursor up. I'm still not used to that. For the rendered viewport, all right, now we see our little board in there. We're ready to add our material. It should already have one on there by default. I just need to click Use Nodes. I'm sure that'll be removed because, you know, we don't really have non-nodal materials anymore. Seems unnecessary to click on Use Nodes, but maybe that'll be gone soon. Cool. Seems like you got the Z-axis thing. And what we're going to start with, it's going to be the grain of the wood is going to be based on a wave pattern. So I'm going to add texture and wave texture. Now if we shift control click, note that I do have in the add-on section, if you look up Wrangler, the Node Wrangler add-on I have enabled. I recommend you keep that on as well. You get some cool functionality, one of which is holding shift control, clicking on any node will plug that directly in as the output. So we're looking at the wave texture in its pure form. And let's see, the bands, that's not the form that we want to go with. We want rings. That makes sense, just like tree rings. And then we need to reposition this texture in a better, more wood-like position. So I'm going to click that node, Control T, another Node Wrangler function to add our texture coordinate and mapping node. Notice, don't forget that Eevee doesn't support geometry pointiness, AO, and bevel nodes. So whoever remembers that will come in handy in the trivia. Thank you, Pavel. I'm not going to say anything more about that, but you are correct. And let's see, where was I? Yeah, we're talking about mapping. So interestingly, I should back up a little bit. I'm getting my wood procedural knowledge from one place, and that is another tutorial on CG Cookie. If we go to the courses and the Shader Forge lesson, where is that? Shader Forge, and the very last lesson in Shader Forge is an extensive wood procedural material that I got all my knowledge from this, and it's from Bartek. He is a wizard. I mean, his technical understanding of nodes is way up there. So if you want a much more detailed version of this material, I recommend watching this. I am doing a simplified version because, you know, for me, I had to watch his video a couple times and go slow at certain parts, but incredible stuff that you learn that you never knew nodes could do. One of those things is what you can do with what do you call these? Vector inputs. So what I can do here is add, I'm going to try and explain why it works, but I'm going to add a color mix RGB, plug that in after the mapping node, and I'm going to multiply the vector data by a color, and that color is based on RGB, correlating that to X, Y, and Z. So red is the X channel, G is the Y channel, B is the Z channel. All right, so what I essentially want to do is scale the wave texture to 0 in the Z-axis. And to do that, I'm going to turn my red channel all the way up, my green channel all the way up, and my blue channel all the way down. Wait a minute, this is not quite right. Oh, because I'm using generated. I want to use object. Okay, let me step back a little bit. So when it's in object mode, object UV space, that's what I'm talking about. You can see that our wave texture is in the center of our board, and I want the rings, these rings, to be at the top of our board, like a piece of wood. And so in order to do that, I'm multiplying. No, that's not correct. I'm doing something wrong. Nuts. Unfortunately, my knowledge of what Bartek talks about is like, I know enough to reproduce it, usually, not in this case. Is it because, is that the reason? That's the reason. Silly goose. Sorry, that's what we tell our kids, silly goose. So the reason was it was not multiplied all the way up. So at 0, this is what you have as the default texture. When you multiply by yellow, you can see that it scales all the way up. Now, I think you can also do that. I mean, if we just scale to 0 over here in the Z channel, it does the same thing. So that's not necessary, but I did want to show you what's possible, because you can you can kind of use this as a mapping coordinate. I guess you could just kind of eliminate this if you wanted. But Bartek does that. I thought that was a really cool mind changer about what you can do with vector coordinates. So in this case, I'm going to leave it in, but also we're going to use that to multiply in some noise color data to adjust our vector as well. So all I've done here is, all right, we've scaled our texture in 0, which stretches it all the way along the z-axis. And let me answer some questions, sorry. Question from Pavel, why not just scale? Yeah, okay, so that is, you could also do that in this situation, but I'm going to show you how to multiply some noise color data next using that yellow idea, that yellow color idea. But you absolutely could just do that. So let's see. Yeah, if we look at our texture now, we have the beginnings of the wood grain, right? So we have the core of the tree, you know, at the how you count rings in a tree, that kind of thing. We've got that established, but being stretched perfectly straight down the length of the board obviously is not realistic. We essentially need a noise texture to kind of go into the 3D space of our UVs, of our texture space, and like alter these lines, like give it some wobbliness. And so we can do that with a texture, noise texture. And we'll, I guess I'll use the object coordinates again. All right, so we can see how that texture lines up. I'm going to add a converter color ramp. And this color ramp, I'm going to leave the bottom flag black and change the white one to be that yellow color. All right, so that's red, green all the way up to 1, blue all the way down. Whoops, that was the wrong flag. Let's make this one black and then reverse it. Doesn't really matter. But, all right, so now we've got that yellow information kind of broken up in the black. And if we multiply again, now we should get some breakup in the noise texture, in the wave texture, right? So changing that value, you can see how that noise pattern is adjusting our rings. All right, so we're on the right track, but we don't have the right values for the scale. A question from Peter, as a bit of a noob on the whole procedural flow programming approach to texturing, should I perhaps not use the Node Wrangler while learning? I don't think so. The Node Wrangler doesn't. No, I don't think so. I think you can use the Node Wrangler if you want. It provides some macros. It doesn't provide any like specific texture nodes, I don't think. It just has some helpful macros. Like for example, when I want to see the wave texture output by itself, I just click Shift Control click on wave texture. Without that option, what you have to do is do it manually. You have to add a shader, emission shader, plug up the wave texture there, and then that emission texture into the material output. That's the same thing, but the Node Wrangler makes that one click. So that's the kind of macro that it does for you, and also adding the texture coordinates. You'd have to add the two manually, connect them manually. So I don't think you have to avoid using the Node Wrangler. But if you are concerned about it, you can get along fine without it as well. All right, so a couple more questions from Ricardo. One from Ricardo: What is the generated texture coordinates actually? Generated texture coordinates. How do I explain this? Because admittedly, I am not a math whiz, and I know that so much of this, almost all of it, is based on math, and I don't necessarily know a ton about this high-level math. But what I think as an artist of generated texture coordinates is it kind of takes texture data. It takes data in 3D and converts it to texture without the need for explicit UV layouts. Okay, so like if we look at the noise texture, for example, by itself, it just looks like a pattern, a 2D pattern that's been pasted onto this board, but it's not. It's actually 3D data. Okay, so the generated texture coordinates allows the noise texture to remain in 3D. All right, and that's why you can rotate this board around, and the pattern, well, what happens if I do generated? Actually, no, it should work if I just tab into edit mode and then rotate. You can see that the pattern shifts along with it. It's like the board is doing a cross section of the overall 3D pattern, and it's being projected onto the board. We're getting into some weird stuff here. If anyone can explain it better in the chat, please do. But like, I don't know how well I did there. Hopefully that was helpful to some degree. Now there's a real question from Omar. Do you watch CG Cookie tutorials from the regular website, or do you have super special powers and access a super vault? No, I just access tutorials on the website like you. Sometimes even my own tutorials I feel weird about saying, but you know, if I ever get a question about rigging on the Piero course, I promise you I have forgotten everything that I did in that course. So to even be able to answer the question, I have to go back and watch the video at least that it references to kind of remember what I did. I mean, yeah, Blender and 3D, it's too much knowledge to remember specific things all at once. You kind of have to re-jog your memory, and that's certainly true for me. Jake, generated versus object texture coordinates. Awesome. Okay, great. So there's a YouTube video that's going to help. 3D material, yeah, exactly, sort of stuff like in Maya, exactly. Yeah, okay, cool. Thanks for the help on the generated texture coordinates. I do hope that makes a little bit more sense, but understand, even for me, like I understand enough to know a little bit what's going on, but mainly I know enough to serve my needs, basically. You don't have to know all the underlying math to get along fine. All right, so where are we at? All right, we had just altered the wave pattern to be a little bit more noisy. Now, I don't want it to be quite this finely broken up. I want to make it a little bit smaller. I want to make the frequency of that breakup a little bit more broad. So I'm going to go down in value to like 1, and then crank up. Using this multiply value, we're kind of increasing the intensity of the material. All right, you can see how that's working. So now we've got a nice little wave pattern, but we can add another layer. I believe this is what I did earlier. So I'm going to select these two nodes, Shift-Control-D, and that's going to just maintain the connection to the texture coordinate. And here I can, let's see here, adjust the, what do I do? I'm going to adjust the scale to be a little bit bigger. Maybe go back up to that 5 value. And this is going to be like a double layer of what I'm trying to do is get the knots. I'm going to try to increase the knot pattern within the wood. Let's see. Question from David. Is the yellow color just temporary so you can see what you're doing in Blender? No, that yellow color is actually important because when I'm multiplying the coordinates, right? So remember, these multiply nodes are affecting the UV coordinates. Which is very different. I never use those for adjusting that, honestly. But I wanted to show you that it's possible because Bartek showed me it's possible. But the yellow is an important color. However, with this new texture, maybe we can play around with the yellow and increase. I don't know, just see what else other kind of results we can get. Now I believe here I want to let's duplicate this node and change it to an overlay, perhaps. Trying to remember what I did earlier. And now if we plug that into the multiply up here. All right, so I need to adjust this. It's kind of fun watching what happens here. All right, so as I crank this black flag up, you can see that we're getting a bit of like these knots appearing. And that I want to keep. Do I need to go lower here? Yeah, okay, so adding this second color ramp as an overlay starts to create that that kind of knot-like pattern. All right, so that's pretty cool. We're well on our way to a wood grain texture at this point. Let's see, anything else I'm forgetting? I don't think so. You know, we can also adjust the number of rings if we change the scale up here. Let's go to 10. That looks pretty good. We can also, using the mapping node, we can adjust the rotation slightly and get a different effect. We can move it so that the center of the ring, you know, is kind of off to one side or the other. You know, you can get variations as you wish. So here's some somewhat simple. If this looks complex, wait till you see Bartek's. He has a lot more functionality built in. But I think maybe 5 actually was a good amount. And maybe move that back over a little bit to the center. There we go. All right. Cool. So the last couple things we need to do for the wood material is obviously establish the right color scheme. We'll do that next. Let's add a converter color ramp. Let's see. Question from Pavel, is that okay that you're using actual color of noise instead of factor into the color ramp? As far as I know, the color and factor become the same thing when you plug it into a color ramp, I think. If anyone knows differently, let me know, but I've never seen a notable difference between using the factor. Well, let's test it. Let's just plug the factor in here. Does that look different? It is a little different. So, I mean, as far as your question, is it okay? I would say without a doubt it's okay, but there is a difference, I think. Weird. I wonder what the difference is. Let's see, another thing we can do is maybe increase. Yeah, I do like that. So if we increase the detail of the noise texture, you can see that it has a notable effect. What about distortion? Yeah, I mean, basically you can play with these all day long and get interesting effects. So yeah, it's pretty neat, pretty fun. It's fairly robust. So yeah, we've got okay, we're establishing the color at this point. I giggled out loud when I saw the knots appear. That's great. So with the color, we're just establishing the grain, and you know, we're going to make this kind of a light brown wood color, as you can imagine, and something like this. Maybe drop down the color a bit. Let's copy that color. Just hover over it. Control C. Paste it up top and increase that value. Is that the way? No, I think I need it reversed. Yeah. No, that doesn't make sense. Okay, yeah, this is right. But what I want to do now is add another flag in the middle, and you'll see what that does. Let me just establish the effect first. All right, so if we zoom really close into the grain, what I've done here is we've got our two extreme colors in between the grain veins. It's the lightest color. And then it kind of steps down to be a broader kind of middle brown color around. You can see it's surrounding the veins. And then the darkest color is all the way on the left. So that's what I've done with these flags. By clicking in the middle, clicking in the middle, creating that new flag and dragging it down. That's what I want. I want really thin grain surrounded by a slightly darker version. So that should be pretty visible at this point. All right, and then so that's kind of step one, getting the main grain pattern established. Now we will add some variety to it, and with the noise texture, I'm going to shift Control D. I'm going to move that up because we're going to use this actually in conjunction with our. I think with this one, we're going to bring. Oh no. Oh no. Blender crashed, people. Where's my terminal? Here it is. That is unfortunate. Let me set this back up. Sorry about that. And I didn't save. I didn't save. Let's see if, oh. That's okay. That's okay. I did create a file, a version of this. Oh, cool. From Spiky. Well, that's not what I'm talking about. Spiky, using the factor output should be faster because it has to calculate one value instead of three, should make no visible difference. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Kind of for an optimized version. Where's the save police? I know, right? I should blame this on you. That's right? No, not at all. Well, fun fact, I am working on a new and improved shader gizmo for the foundation, the fundamental courses for 2.8. We are going to do those, and we're going to do those as right as we possibly can. But that's something I've been working on. But yeah, since I didn't save, I don't think an autosave. Oh, what's this? So that's not too bad, actually. We did save it, or Blender saved it for us. Look at that. I didn't know that was really possible. Well, let's save it. Thank you, Blender. You saved our skin, my skin. And what is this? So I'm going to call this wood procedural, wood proc. That should be fine by itself. All right, and let me just catch up to where I was. Shader and color. Where are we at? Color, RG, nope. Converter, color ramp. How far am I into this? All right, we've got some time. Sorry, I got to catch my bearings. I didn't need two color ramps here. Let's do what we did already, and we're looking for a brown color. Something like this. Copy to the other flag. Make that brighter. Maybe a little less yellow. Yeah, like that. All right, control clicking in the middle and then dragging that flag down. It is a little bit slower. The UI is a bit slower for me. All right, I want really, really tight grain there. All right, so now we're basically back to where we were. I will make sure to save it. Ooh, that's true. That should definitely be a tag, the save tag. I like that, Omar. That's clever. If I see that thing spammed in the chat, I mean, I'm gonna be like, whoa, okay, definitely do it. All right, so where were we at? All right, I'm duplicating this color ramp. Shift Control D, because we're gonna add kind of a generic variant of noise along that kind of coordinates with the grain pattern. So in order to do that, I'm going to use, I believe we'll use this vector. Good grief, I'm probably going to be saving a lot since it is running slightly more choppy. All right, let's look at what that is by itself. We'll remove I don't need the yellow in this case. Yeah, the UI is definitely slow. What's going on? UI, one thing about Eevee is unlike cycles, it tends to affect the UI of Blender, which is annoying because like with cycles, it doesn't matter how intense. Typically, it doesn't matter really how intense your scene is. Your UI stays fast. So like with Eevee, a lot of times I'll click on a color flag and try and change it real time, not expecting the render to be real time, but just expect the UI to be that way. But Eevee can take a toll on the UI, and that shows up in the stream especially. So anyway, we're looking at this noise texture, and it must be, let's increase the scale. Yeah, there we go. How about, all right, so by using the exact same modified coordinates, we start to get a really interesting pattern. And you know, we have options. We can use this one perhaps, see what that looks like. Right, so that both of them are valid in my opinion. Like it goes along with the wood. So I'm checking up with the chat. Is it possible to create a special command in chat that will display save all over your screen? I think we can at least do the tag. That should be a good start. I should be able to notice that. But yeah, so this noise pattern, once we plug in these modified coordinates, we start to get both options that would work really well over top of this wood simply by using a color mix RGB, set it to overlay. Where is overlay? Overlay. And now when we plug those up, it should add some interesting, some unique pattern. So in this case, we've got a stripe pattern, and maybe overlay isn't actually the best in this case, but we can make the streaks a little bit bigger. How about just like a multiply? Yeah, so just subtly adjust the grain there. I like the streaks. So certain wood types have a very distinguished streaks, whereas we can also, if we, let's just duplicate this and use this vector input instead. Same kind of situation, Control S real quick, duplicate, and we're gonna make this one an overlay. I know that overlay works best with this. Man, definitely slower. Put that into the second slot. Yeah, check that out. That's pretty cool. Maybe make it a little bit bigger, a lot bigger. Oh, right. Also, we can adjust the flags, of course. All right, so that will look pretty neat plugged up. Yeah, so anyway, like using those together kind of creates some interesting shapes, interesting color variants, I would say. And the second one that we did kind of serves as a bit of a an aged look to it. So anyway, those are the components we need definitely. One more, that's right, I forgot one more, and that's an important one. It's the pore detail, right? So with this guy, we're going to crank up the black, crank down the white. We're going to basically create little spots. All right, and let's increase to like 50, maybe even more than that, like 100. Maybe adjust the flag a bit. All right, so now this should look really nice, again, as an overlay. I'm going to save. So you can see, like, while the node network is definitely getting somewhat complex, it's a lot of duplication, and that's why it shouldn't blow your brain or anything that it's so complex or anything. All right, let's see what that overlay looks like. Why is that not? Why is that not working? Oh, someone mentioned that the factor is actually going to be more optimized. Is Eevee giving me issues? I'm afraid Eevee has kind of messed up. It's not taking that color data with it. Let's try swapping in the factor, see if that does kind of alleviate some of the calculation. It is interesting that it does seem to change visually. All right, so maybe this one I'll dial back to like 0.2. The more I see that, the more I'm like, I think it maybe isn't working that well. Let me go ahead and remove that. I'm trying to get rid of those dark streaks. I really think Eevee is not catching up with me. Oh no, that's not. It's fine. This right here. That's the one I want. All right, we good? All right, am I missing something? Why? Oh, it's the alpha channel. Okay, that is, I do apologize. I rehearsed this, but like sometimes rehearsing, you can kind of try and repeat what you did in rehearsal and not like do, be in the moment and do what is is right, I guess. So I'm kind of bumbling around this. I wish this was a little more clear. Let us try and, yeah, I don't understand why the overlay is acting like that. I guess bringing down the black, the white flag down to gray helps. Still, it's just not like, I don't like it. Now I just say I have to figure out what I don't like and kind of fix it. Anyway, we're going to be done with this thing pretty soon. Question from Prashan. Question, what is faster to render, procedural or textures? One thing about Eevee is I would say that textures are going to be much faster than procedurals. While Eevee does do pretty well with procedurals, I feel like it starts to chug after a while. And I say that from experience. I created a scene that was absolutely no shading information. It was all procedural alpha planes that were emitting, like an emission shader. So there was no shading information whatsoever, just bloom and alpha emission materials. And that it took like 27 seconds per frame with Eevee. So, I mean, to me, that should have been a very easy scene for it to deal with, but it was not. So like, this is just not what overlay should look like. Maybe soft light? I don't know. It's just not at all what I expect from overlay, and I use overlay all the time. Yeah, something... Can anyone see what I'm doing wrong? Like, at this point... Okay, I'm an idiot. I'm an idiot. I just need to switch the... I just needed to switch the inputs. I am an idiot. All right. There we go. So now we've got the pore pattern starting to make an appearance. Good gracious, what is wrong with me? Maybe we'll go with a multiply. All right, that's going to be more like it. And we're going to change the scale value up to like 200. So this is where you can adjust like how much pore detail is going on. But yeah, something like that. This has turned into a very exotic piece of wood. But yeah, you can. Anyway, we've got enough control in here to be the kind of wood that we need, that we want. All right, I'm going to call that done. It took like 40 minutes to do. Who are you and what have you done with Kent? I tell you what, live teaching, like if I was recording this tutorial, I'd be cutting all this junk out. You'd see a nice streamlined version of this, but doing it live, man, if something, I don't know, I struggle sometimes with being optimal when being live. So I appreciate you being patient with me as I bumble through that. But my fear is that when I do bumble through, maybe it's not as clear about what I've been doing. So I hope you guys have been following along well enough to follow me to this point and be able to create a shader like this. But yeah, we've got a wood material. It's certainly turned into an exotic wood material, but we can dial that back a little bit. Now this seems maybe a little more normal, but this procedural is essentially done. We'll need to plug it into our actual material node, but the texture itself is done, and we can start to apply it to the sled because after all, that we are here to see the sled. That is the end game. So yeah, how can we plug this in? Obviously, it's going to go into this output is going to go into the base color. And let's see. So we don't have any light or anything. Let me go load up an HDRI, save my file, use nodes, and let's grab an HDRI environment texture. Data to CG library textures, HDRI 0, HDRI Haven, and we'll just roll with the Spruit Sunrise. There we go. All right, so we'll talk about roughness, maybe take that down to 0.2. Also, tab into edit mode. This is really cool, just being able to do this and get the EV feedback. Control B to bevel the edges. Just round them over a bit. There we go. Right, so right now it's a perfectly smooth sanded board, which we do not want. We want to turn this into a bump node. So Shift A, vector bump. Did not want to do that. Control, Control Z. Okay, sometimes Control Z can cause issues. Vector, I'm adding, not swapping out, I'm adding a bump node. All right, so let's plug that in and maybe make it a little bit more intuitive with some reroute nodes. I'm holding holding Shift and right-click dragging to create these reroute nodes. All right, maybe that makes a little bit more sense. And let's plug the bump. I want that to be in the height, not in the strength. Plug that into our normal. See what happens. All right, way too strong, but it is working. Let's go to 0.1. Right away, we start to see our texture affecting the bump map, which is great. Also being procedural, we don't have to worry about texture density, like we don't have to worry about pixelation. Nice. So, I mean, we can get away with that, I think. But yeah, okay, I think we're done with this. We're ready to apply it to our sled and get on with the show, because this has taken longer than I expected. All right, I'm going to save that file, see if I've missed any questions. Yikes. I remember that moment from one of Kent's streams where he is freezed for a few minutes just repeating one phrase constantly. Oh no. If you can find, okay, that's from a tutorial, I think. Was it a stream or a tutorial? Because, yeah, let me know what tutorial that is. I always feared that would make it through my editing process and you would hear me repeat the same phrase. So yeah, Pavel, if you know what tutorial that is, I would like to update that. It's kind of embarrassing. Question from Omar: do you tend to use the clamp box in the mix node to clamp the white values? I don't do that by default. I feel that the values get all. Sometimes I feel the values get all messed up, and I wonder if that helps. That's kind of how I approach it. Like, I don't know. Sometimes if it's not the effect that I want, or if it doesn't seem to the math operation doesn't seem to be quite what I expected, I might tick on the clamp value, but it's there's not so much a science to it for me. Sometimes it has an effect, sometimes it doesn't, and I don't exactly know why. But I see it as just an option for me to play around with. All right, so yeah, I've saved this file. Let's go back to the sled. Let's name it to be fair. Wood procedural. Name the material, save it. Then let's open our sled. Flex Flyer 02. I'm going to save this as 03. Just hit the plus button. One of the fundamentals? Yikes. I mean, the fundamentals, so many people watch that. Like, that's one of our most watched. Yikes. Uh-oh, Pavel, the noodles. Are you talking about the node network was unintelligible? It didn't make any sense. Monster course, which one was that? All right, I'm gonna have to look through these. Either the monster course, one of the fundamentals. Okay, maybe the sculpting one. I should fix that. All right, so we're back to the sled. Let's apply the shader now. We can simply append it by going to File, Append, go to our wood procedural, the material, and then wood procedural. So I've got that in the scene now, but I am anticipating a problem that about the orientation of these boards, because remember, that's extremely important. So if I turn on orientation for my wood pieces, whoops, object and enable axes. Okay, we have a couple problems. Number one, none of these boards have the axis in the center. It's in the center of the world, or well, it's kind of spread out all over the place. But I want them to be in the center, so I've got to establish the origin point and then establish. Yeah, none of them seem to have to be pointed in the right axis. So let me step through these. For this horizontal piece, I want. Actually, the origin is properly placed there. What about the axis? That's Z up. So what I need to do is tab into edit mode, rotate in Y, which I cannot do. I need to actually apply my mirror modifier, tab into edit mode, rotate in Y, using median point, rotate Y 90 degrees, and then tab to object mode and rotate Y -90. There we go. Now we've got Z pointed down the length of this piece, so that one's established. Let's try this guy. If we isolate it, turn on our axes. Sorry, I should have thought of this when I was modeling, but I kind of slipped my mind. All right, let me, I want to maintain the mirror modifier, so let me just because. So Shift S, cursor to selected in the center of those verts, and then set origin. By right clicking, we get these options, set origin to 3D cursor. And what can I do at this point? I need to rotate in Y, or in X rather, 90 degrees. Let me use the cursor. Rotate in X 90 degrees. Tab to object mode, rotate in X -90. All right, so now we've got it pointed in the Z axis. That's better. And then these, I think, they'll share. I'll just put the origin where the cursor is currently to match up with this board. All right, so right click, set origin to 3D cursor, tab to edit mode, rotate X 90. Back to object mode, rotate X -90, and that should have our Z axis pointed the right way, which it does. All right, just a couple more pieces. Okay, you guys are helping. Yukino, it looks like, what is the orientation for? Yeah, Yukino, I think you missed that part. But think of how the tree grows. Like the tree growing upward is the Z-axis, and that's how all boards are cut from a tree along the length. So you need your Z, for the shader to work properly, you need your Z-axis facing down the length of the board. That's kind of why. Maybe watch the recording of the stream. Also, you can look up, if you go to the Shader Forge, Bartek goes over this extensively at the very bottom, the wood lesson. He talks about why the Z-axis, like how to align it properly. That's what we're talking about. Save. Thank you. Yeah, that's a good reminder. It's definitely in the modeling flow. It's either the creature modeling for production or art of sculpting. I'm leaning towards creature modeling. Oh wow, that was one of the first I ever recorded. I'm glad to know that embarrassment has been out there for so long. And all right, so let me finish getting the orientation of these guys. Let's just do the same thing that I did with the other. I'm gonna set origin to the 3D cursor, rotate in X 90. Tab to object mode, rotate in X -90. Is that it? No, there's a few pieces at the bottom. Almost there. I forgot how many wood pieces there were. Maybe we can try editing all of these at the same time. So yeah, if we use, let me set origin to geometry maybe? Nope. I'll just set all the origins to, well, just the cursor again. Why not? Shift right click, set origin to 3D cursor, tab to edit mode on all of these because that's a new 2.8 feature. Control S just to be sure. Tab into edit mode. Let's use, wait a minute. Yeah, why didn't the origin set properly? Set origin to 3D cursor. Okay, there we go. Tab to edit mode on all of them. How cool is that? Rotate using the cursor in Y. That's not going to work. We got to apply the mirror modifier. Rotate in Y. Well, where's the Z axis pointed up? Rotate in Y 90. Nope. Rotate in X 90. Oh. Yeah, I've got to apply each, I guess, individually. Tab into edit mode, rotate Y 90. Object mode, rotate Y negative 90. All right, now we've got the Z pointed in the length of these objects. All right, finally, we've got all those established. I'm going to select my wooden pieces and apply that material that we appended, wood procedural right here. Let's save the file and I need to make a render window down here in the bottom. All right. I will also, I'm sure, turn off my overlays. And Z, let's go to rendered view. Yeah, I'm going to need a world environment. We'll use that. Which one am I going to use? Let's go find a good one. HDRI Haven. Let's use this Kiera Dawn. I think that one should work well. It's not a winter scene, but it'll look wintry enough once we have a ground plane. Let's go ahead and add the ground plane. Alt-G to put it at the ground, to put it at the floor, and then scale it up using the median point. Scale it up real big. Control A and apply the scale. There we go. I could have sworn I applied that material. Yeah. Did I append the wrong material? Let me save that. Let's go open that recent one. Okay, so the wood procedural. Now all these pieces have the wood procedural. Why is it not rendering? Am I missing something? I have no idea why the material's not rendering. All right, well, let's test it with a brand new noise texture. What is going on? Guys, I'm at a loss. If you guys can help me, MatCap? No, I'm on. Yeah, I'm rendering with Eevee. I mean, what if I switch over to cycles? All right, something is wrong with my material. No, I'm not in solid view. Definitely in rendered. Y'all, what is happening? How about a new material and then change the color? Okay. Oh, how bizarre. Use nodes is not enabled. Look at that. The button is right here. Use nodes not enabled. See, why is that setting even there? Wow. Yeah, I hope that gets removed. That's pretty silly. All right. So anyway, we are back. We have our wood material applied to our, well, let me maximize this. It might be a little bit slow, maybe not. So we've got our wood material applied, but the scale is not really nice, so we need to adjust the scale. But because we oriented everything properly, all the wood pieces, it's applied and there's no issues other than the scale. Anyway, yeah, the use nodes thing, that's bizarre. All right, so I wonder if we can change the scale pretty easily. Maybe just go one by one, because the scale on the grain pattern looks okay. Maybe it's the pore detail. So let's look at what the combination looks like before the pores. No, I do kind of think everything needs to be scaled separately. So what if I do... What if I try and do this all in one go? So basically I'm trying to make my mapping node adjust all of the scales together, all of the texture nodes together. Let's see if that functions as I imagine. Let's change the scale of all of them to like 0.5. I mean, go up actually. Let's go to 2. Yeah, okay, that worked. Simple enough. So yeah, maybe now it makes sense why I did the wood shader in a different scene and then just brought it in. I changed one small thing and now it's working for the entire sled. Awesome. All right, let's see what the bump looks like once it's plugged into the principal shader. Did I miss anything in the chat? Sorry, I kind of have been talking to myself. Oh, thank you, Dragon Ice. I'm glad you guys seem to have noticed that. Anything else? Question from Omar. I still haven't used 2.8, still waiting for a stable version. Do you think it's time to use it, or should I wait a bit longer for better stability? I think stability is pretty good at this point, honestly. Now, with it being called a beta, I do feel like features are being introduced, like sometimes brand new things are being introduced where they really shouldn't be as a beta. So in that way, the beta is a little bit... not unstable, but just kind of unpredictable, I suppose. And I think it's a fine time to get into 2.8. Honestly, with our re-recording, the fundamentals, like we haven't started recording, but we have been waiting for the right time. And we think it is the right time. We think that the fundamental features of Blender will not change between now and when it's released. So in that respect, like if you rely on that as well, then yeah, it's not a bad time to jump in. To jump into 2.8. All right. Oh, at 2016. All right, thank you. So it looks like you guys found exactly where I messed up. Thank you, guys. I will have to fix that video and update it. Thank you. I'll come back and check in the chat after the stream. All right. Where are we at? So we've got the wood material. We were looking at the bump map. That's right. That's where I left it. Now, what if we increase the strength? Because right now I don't see much happening. Yeah, okay. So as we increase the strength, you know, I think what it's going to do is make it look a little older, a little bit more used, which I do think makes a little bit of sense. We could also try and converter. Let's add a color ramp. There we go. We can try and crush maybe the whites down. Let me show you what it's doing. By crushing the whites down, we're going to essentially limit the bump map to be mostly the pore detail, that really fine markings. Yeah, that looks pretty good. That looks a little bit more natural. All right, that's not too bad. It does seem to be a little bit like whitewashed or something. You know, like the reflections aren't quite good. Perhaps that is because, you know, maybe we should use this this situation, like maybe duplicate the color ramp and have it affect the roughness. All right. So if we look at our map, our texture again, let's kind of revert back to the original. Maybe the pore detail, that those fine streaks, maybe they need to be less reflective, and then the brighter areas need to be more reflective. So we simply need to reverse this, flip the color ramp, so that way the white area is the pores. You know, when it comes to reflection, the closer to white, the in roughness, the less clear the reflection. So I'm going to leave that at how about like 0.6, and then the black area, let's change that to like 0.05. All right, now this should be a decent roughness value to plug in. Oh yeah, I got to shift control click on the principal BSDF. Let's see. I guess I feel like I lost my reflections almost entirely. Maybe what did I 0.05, yeah, maybe 0.01. There we go. I think that looks pretty good. All right, so the wood material, what time is it? Yeah, I think I can move on to the metal at this point. So we can. I'm going to move on to the red metal of the rails that we see. So that's going to start with a pretty simple procedural principled material. Make sure that I have those objects. I'll just do that in this view, another 3D view. So I'm going to select all of my wood or my metal bits, which I can do easily. Remember, I put them in the same collection. So let's select all of those. I guess I need to select one, Shift G, select by collection. Excellent. So new material, we'll call this red painted metal. Copy the materials to selected, and right away let's just change the base color to that red. And establish a reflectivity roughness down to like 0.1. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Off to a good start really easily, really quickly with that one. Oh look, these materials, these objects don't have the wood material. Copy material to selected. All right, that looks pretty decent. Oh yeah, while I'm at it, I mentioned earlier that there was a setting that I feel like was slowing down Eevee more than it needed to, and that was the screen space reflections. So right now the plane, like the sled, seems to be kind of floating away from the plane. Like you don't have that feedback of whether it's touching the plane or not. And in part, turning on ambient occlusion will help. So with that enabled, and it takes a moment to load, now we start to see contact shadows, but also screen space reflections help a lot to make the sled look like it's on the ground. Now we can, with a small window like this, the screen space reflections are okay, but in my experience when I'm in the shader node, the shader editor, you know, like it can get really, really slow to even adjust the UI elements. Now, of course, now that I say it, it's not happening. But I think screen space reflections takes a pretty big hit when it comes to Eevee. Question from David. From the bump node, Andrew Pice always says to crank up the distance value, but make a low value for the strength, and that gives better results. I found it to be somewhat true. Thoughts? Interesting. I'd never adjust the distance. Let's see if we can get some feedback on that. You say he says to leave the strength low. crank up the distance value, but make a low value for strength. So let's, I guess, let's just change the distance by itself, see what that does. So from 1, I don't know if you guys can see that. It seems like from 0 to 0.1, let's increase the strength just for the sake of seeing what's happening. All right, so we've got a pretty strong bump happening. If we go from 0, distance turns it off, it seems, 0.1. Then what about 1? Interesting. What does the distance do? So I don't honestly know the difference. I can't tell immediately the difference between strength and distance. Does anyone else know? Interesting. I mean, I've always known the setting is there, but I've never been able to tell a difference. Question, Omar, if it doesn't snow in my country, if I ever get, if it doesn't snow in my country, if I ever get to see the snow, is it okay for adults to ride a sled? I saw someone else say, yeah, it's absolutely okay to ride a sled. Definitely. When you're an adult, you go a lot faster in a sled, so it's more of a rush. It's more thrilling. David, to your point, I can't honestly tell a difference. Maybe this isn't a great example to test out the bump map, but I cannot tell a particular difference in the distance setting. I'm going to jump back over to the metal material. All right, and let's think about what needs to go into the metal to make it a good material. I think, for one, we need to scuff up the edges, right? If this thing has been sledding down a hill, it's bound to have hit some rocks and some trees. Well, trees, at least like branches and whatnot. So it's going to bang up the edges a bit. It's also going to... on those edges, I think we can make a difference between what's painted and what's metal, right? So wherever it's scratched needs to be like the underlying metal, and where it's not scratched, that's going to be the painted metal. So let's focus on isolating the edges of these objects. Unfortunately, as Pavel mentioned earlier, as in cycles, maybe we can visualize this real quick. Input geometry. If I control click on several of these till I get to the bottom, all right, the pointiness node, the pointiness socket does not work in Eevee yet. I really hope it will, because that's extremely powerful. But typically you need to crank up the contrast like this. And if we switch over to, let me save it, switch over to cycles. Yeah, you can see what the pointiness does. All right, now if you've been using this, if you've been using Blender and materials, this should be no surprise to you. But what it allows us to do is essentially isolate our edges. All right, now you can see there's white on all the edges. That's from the pointiness node. It's calculating something with the geometry. But unfortunately in Eevee, we do not have that option, but we do have a backup for it. I'm going to make sure to save this and then jump over to our 3D view. And I'm going to tab into vertex paint for this object and immediately go to paint dirty vertex colors. All right, that's going to do something very similar. If you can see that, let me just isolate it. That's going to do something extremely similar to the pointiness, but it's going to be as a vertex color option that we can then pipe into the shading, the shader editor. Unfortunately, I have to do this for each piece. So let me go one by one, looking at turning off everything except the sled metal. All right. Okay, so I've done that piece. Next, let's go over here, vertex paint mode, and paint dirty vertex colors. All right, we'll be able to adjust it, so if it doesn't look perfect, that's okay. It will look good in a minute. Vertex paint mode and dirty vertex colors. Just a couple more. And vertex paint. one more. Dirty vertex colors. Sorry, there's one more. All right. There we go. Now we can turn on everything else. Let's go see what that did in the shader node, in the shader editor. All right, so the way you access that vertex color information, now we have an option. I'm not sure when this was included, but input vertex colors and COL. That's the name, the default name of a vertex color when you add it. You can find that in your object data panel. Vertex colors right here, COL. And that should be the same name for all of our objects. It needs to be the same name for all the objects in order to pipe in procedurally like this. So we can get rid of the geometry node, instead plug in our vertex colors. All right, now we have that data and we can adjust it accordingly. Nice. All right, so we're kind of isolating the edges. That's the goal, at least. And this is not, what's going on here? That doesn't look right. Wonder if the, why does that not look good? Oh, I think I know. I think I need to apply some modifiers for that to look right. Let's see. Actually, that might be true for everything. I forgot that part of it. So yeah, okay, I need to redo that. I'm going to turn off the wood, the rivets, and the ground plane. Also the ref. All right, so what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to select all my objects, Control 0 to turn all of their subdivision surface modifiers off, and then Object Convert to Mesh. That's going to collapse all of our material, all of our modifiers, and then Control J, so now they're all one object, and Control 2 to re-engage the subdivision. All right. So now this will be a simpler way. It's a little destructive because we no longer have our modifiers, but it's okay. Vertex paint. Let's first of all, I have my color set to white, and I'm going to set those vertex colors, Shift K. That will just basically whitewash everything, and then once again paint dirty vertex colors. Now everything has proper vertex colors. Sorry for that little hiccup. See if I'm missing any questions. Yes, I am. From Jake, Kent, are you getting the hang of the new collection system like that? I find it so much more versatile than the old layer system. I've got the hang of it as much to say that I can organize my scenes pretty well, and I obviously like naming the collections appropriately. Missing out on the naming in the previous iteration of Blender, that was certainly a bummer. But I haven't done much else other than organize my scene objects. That's about all I've done with the collection so far. Something that I don't love about collections is, if I go back, let's see if I can make this relevant. So, you know, sometimes if we've got my sled here, and and let's say I like hide this object for whatever reason, you know, and I'm working on this piece, I'm modeling it, whatever, and then for whatever reason I want to turn off the wood, and then I want to go right back to having the wood on. It brings back everything in that collection, and so now we have this object. And often I find myself, when I'm modeling, like I'm working on a character right now with a lot of different pieces, and so I'll have to go back and manually hide that again. So I can't remember if that's how the old layer system worked, but that's one thing about collections. I wish it would remember, like, I don't know if I do wish, in that specific scenario, I kind of wish it would remember that, but I can see why it wouldn't. Anyway, that's kind of a raw thought. Don't take that to the bank or anything, or as like hard feedback. It's just I've noticed that being a bit of slightly cumbersome. Anyway, I'll get back to another question from Omar. Will CG Cookie ever have its own Wikipedia page? I don't know. I don't know how like big or well known you have to be to get a Wikipedia page. I suppose you guys could create one. We could create one, but I feel like that's a little bit prideful if we created our own. But I think anything can have a Wikipedia page. It's just when you get known enough for someone to do it. Let's see. Any other questions I'm missing from Pavel? Notice that's still sad that you are forced to use dirty vertex colors because AO nodes take into account other objects. Wait, that's a good option. I didn't think about that. Hold on, let me where am I at? What is this? For some reason I've lost. Where's my objects? What happened? Overlays. Why are my objects completely missing? Oh, I was in local view there specifically. That's weird. All right, so back to where we were. Yeah, so Pavel, you mentioned the AO node. Let me look at that because that potentially could be an option I didn't think about. Shift A input, the ambient occlusion node is working with Eevee. Let me do it on, whoops, I want to do it specifically on the rail objects. Okay, input ambient occlusion, let's look at that. So you can, I think, make it only local. Oh, you can in cycles. I guess you can't do that in Eevee yet. Let me save the file. So yeah, in cycles, you can, if we turn that off, you can see that we have darkening on the bottom of the rail, which is coming from the ground plane, but you can turn off only, or you can turn on only local, and it will essentially only do ambient occlusion for the parts in that mesh. But yeah, I guess with Eevee, currently you cannot turn that setting off. But what about this inside? Okay, that's fine. We can't do inside either, I guess. That's kind of a bummer. Well, let me see. Let me see what we can do. Shift D. I'm just playing with this by the seat of my pants at this point. Flip color. Yeah, that doesn't quite do what we need, but it is kind of interesting. It could serve as like isolating dirt. Maybe that's another thing we'll do, is isolate some dirt in the crevices just like this. I actually do like that. I'm going to leave that there and use it. But currently, what do we have here? So yeah, we went back, we corrected our vertex colors, and now we can see that that's working a lot better, isolated towards the edges. Okay, so this is going to be pretty good because now we can swap in those white areas with a metal shader and the black areas with our red painted metal. So I'm just going to do this. I'm not going to do it by altering the base color and all that stuff. I'm going to do it simply by duplicating principled, making this one a white material, cranking up the metal value all the way to 1, specular down. All right, so now we've got this chrome material, which I don't necessarily want it pure chrome. I want it a little bit darker, something like that. Roughness at like 0.3. Try and turn on anisotropic. I can't remember if that's working for Eevee or not. Can someone answer me that, if anisotropic, that setting is working in Eevee off the top of their head? Yeah, the AO node is great. I mean, what was it? V-Ray for 3ds Max had the AO node just like this. Well, it wasn't a node, but they had the AO factor option way back in like 2010 is when I started using it, and I used it all the time. So I've been asking in Blender, I've been hoping in Blender that it would come, and it finally is here. So yeah, I agree that that's a great feature. Kamada, having the AO come from the ground in this case could be a good thing. That's true. Yep, I see where you're coming from there. I don't think there's any other questions I missed. Gotcha, yeah. All right, so I'm going to mix these materials using our vertex color. Shift A shader, mix shader, and I believe this is correct. Yeah, okay, so now if we zoom in, we've got metal on the edges, and this makes logical sense because as the painted metal is going to be nicked on its edges first. That's the first place, that's the most exposed place of the shape. We're going to see the underlying metal exposed, so that this is adding some age to our rails, which is good. It's still subtle overall. I mean, we've got a small window, but like if we zoom out bigger, you know, it is subtle, and we can adjust that if you want more or less. But another thing that'll help it kind of establish a believability to it is making it affect the bump map. So let me tab back, not tab, but go back to the shader editor, zoom in, and we can make this color ramp a bump node. So Shift A, vector, and bump. Need to wrap this up in the next like 10 minutes. Plug that into our height map. And I actually need to invert it, I believe. So let's just duplicate the color ramp rather. Invert the flags. All right, so the reason I invert is white on a bump map is like raised portion and black is lowered. So that's why we want the paint to be slightly extruded out. All right, we'll make that the height, and then plug in the for the normal, I believe on both of them. Let's see what that looks like. All right, so yeah, now as we zoom in, we can definitely see a way too strong bump effect. Let's go down to 0.1. Might need to actually, instead of a gradient, just make it really, really crisp. All right, so now, yeah, you can see just ever so slightly, we have this kind of shelf for where the paint appears to be chipped off, basically. All right, really subtle effect, but just following the logic of like how this material would be structured in real life. So we've got kind of the edge scratches, sort of. I'm gonna maybe try and fast track this a little bit. What I'm missing now is there's a definitive pattern, often with painted metal, that there's a little bumpiness to it. It's not usually like perfectly smooth like this. So I'm going to incorporate that as a Voronoi texture. So question from Irenel, will the invert option on bump node do the same thing? Yes, it will. The reason I did not choose to do that in this situation is I'm going to add another bump component, and I don't want to have to worry about inverting that separate bump component. So I'm just going to, the only one that needs inversion is this initial layer. So that's why I chose not to do it in that case, because I'm going to be adding to the bump input with a texture Voronoi node. All right, let's look at that by itself. Well, for one, we need some texture coordinates because that the generated does not look the best. I'm going to go with object. Excellent. Now let's scale this up. Like, what about 50? Yeah, I think that's going to be a decent pattern. Converter, color ramp. Another thing about Eevee is often when you change nodes, like you can see that it changed, like it updated, but not fully. I have to like orbit around in the Eevee viewport for it to update like completely, which is a little bit of a, it only happens sometimes, but it's a little bit annoying. Anyway, let's go to the B-spline option. And I'm going to kind of adjust it like so. All right, now I'm going to incorporate this as a color mix node over top of our other, our like paint bump component. All right, let's see what that bump looks like. And actually, I only want this part on the red. So maybe, what if I eliminate it from the other material? What does that do? Yeah, that's fine. You can still see the shelf, but the mixture here needs to go way down in favor of the other material. Like way down, 0.001, 0.02. There we go. So this is, hopefully this pattern is recognizable to you guys and gals, as something that you may have seen on like a painted metal type of material. I think it's still a little bit too strong. 0.003? Yeah, something like that. There we go. I did want to, let's call that finished. I mean, there's always things you can do to kind of update it. Let's see if I'm missing any questions. Doesn't look like it. Excellent. So yeah, we'll just call this done. I know someone was asking about the icy material underneath the sled, which I can quickly create that. It's not too difficult. I mean, at least it wasn't in rehearsal. We'll see how it goes when it's live. But I'm going to select that object, call it the ground plane, just so it's a little more organized. I'm going to save my file and create a new material, call it icy ground. And the current material, the baseline, you know, we need it to be a little bit more reflective, like the roughness to go down, like 0.2, something like that. The white color is going to be fine. Really, it's just, I think it's just a single, I think what I did is just a texture, noise texture. And then I think what it's like a higher, let's increase the scale value. Also look at the factor. Increase the scale value and the detail significantly. Also the distortion. All right, now let's adjust our converter color ramp. All right, so we have kind of a silly pattern like this. I'm not planning on seeing it so far away, so it's kind of procedural looking now, but once we get close to the sled, should be a little less so. I think maybe I did 2 noise textures. Oh, also, yeah, I mean, forget it. I usually like to use the object coordinates, but I'm just going to roll with the default. When you don't have anything plugged in, it uses the generated texture coordinates. So we'll roll with that, and it's not a big deal. In this situation, it really only adjusts how the scale works, how it looks in the end. All right, and then I'm going to, I think what I'll do is, I mean, maybe this will be enough by itself. Let's try this by itself first, and then see if I need another texture in there. Shift A, vector bump. So by me, when I crush the blacks like I did, the reason that's going to be helpful is like when it clamps out. Here's a case where I probably would clamp, but that black is going to look like a flat part of the ice, which is going to reflect the most clearly. And this gray scale pattern is going to look like bumps in the ice. So that's why I like to crush the blacks a little bit. Plug that into the height. See what that looks like by itself. So now, yeah, you can see this pattern start to arise and make it much more subtle. Plug that into the normal. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Keep it subtle and it starts to look, you know, like ice. Especially when you have this screen space reflection, which, by the way, I thought was an ace in the hole. If Eevee started to slow down the stream, slow down the Blender UI, it was because of screen space reflections. And now I'm not sure that's true because it's handled it like a champ. But yeah, you can see those little puddles. Maybe I can increase that a little bit. But yeah, you should be able to see that happen real time right there. So yeah, that's really all it was. I guess not even another texture. We don't even need that. Very, very simple ice material. So we can look at this maximized. And yeah, I mean, I think it passes. There's definitely things we could do a little bit better. Well, not necessarily better, but like maybe I could add a scratch layer where it's not just on the edges, but like little cuts and nicks that have over time cut specific parts of the paint away, and in like a just a scuff pattern. Oh yeah, we did talk about, I want to do this actually. I don't want to leave that out. But right now there's no dust and grime layer. So in the metal, we added that and never did anything with it. But this can be a whole nother material actually. I'm going to make another mix shader node, Shift D to mix, add a, let's use a diffuse material, diffuse shader, diffuse BSDF. Let's just make it kind of a dark, grimy, kind of brownish black. All right, and now we can use this. Well, this should be AO. Yeah, there we go. It just needed to update or something. So now we can use this as a factor to mix in this brown over top. All right, it's pretty subtle. Maybe we can kind of crank that up a bit. So yeah, now we've got some darkening representing like dust and grime. If we add like a noise texture in here, using the object as the vector, so increase the detail, we can start to get a little bit of a dirt pattern that we can overlay. Maybe make the scale a bit bigger. Yeah, something like this. And then let's mix it. Shader, mix, not shader, color, mix, RGB. Overlay. All right, yeah, you see now with that overlaid, it kind of adds this pattern. Nice. Now it looks even more grimy, and with that being a mix, we should see a nice grimy pattern start to infiltrate our nice clean painted metal. You can see that start to make an appearance. How about maybe this is an example where the clamp would be nice, but nah, I don't really see anything. Anyway, that's something we can do. Add a little bit more grime and dirt to it, but definitely ways to enhance our sled. However, I hope that you guys took away some nice nuggets from it. I was excited to share the wood procedural, but I feel like I butchered it. Anything I'm missing? Let me look back at the questions. Question from Matthew Ulray. Something like this wouldn't need Fresnel fritter, would it? So if you're asking if there needs to be some Fresnel, like that is built into the principled BSDF. If you're being cheeky with the menu thing that we did, I just think that's funny. That was a lot of fun. I hope you guys had fun with that. The like creating a Blender menu. That was a lot of fun seeing what you guys came up with. A lot of clever dish names up in there. Awesome. All right. So the last thing we need to do is go over the trivia. So we'll do that now. Then we'll call it a day. All right. If you stuck around, looks like there's several of you still here. So if you stuck around, let's answer some questions, and you should know how this works. The rules of the game: no Googling. There's only a couple trivia. There's only a couple things I guess you could Google, but no Googling. This what I'm going to do is ask the question, count to 10 after asking the question, and you have to guess your answer in that 10 seconds. You keep track of your total right answers on your own. If you get all 5 correct, actually we only have 4 today. Sorry. If you get all 4 correct, then you are a winner, and I'm going to give you 40 XP points. So make sure I'm not missing any other thing based on the demo. Doesn't look like it. Awesome. All right, if you're ready, let's answer some questions. First one, that's not 50 XP. It's going to be 40. I only have 4 questions today. Number 1, who developed the Eevee engine? This is honestly one of the reasons I only had 4. It took me like a half hour to be 95% sure of this answer. But anyway, I'm going to count to 10. Give me your answer. Who developed the EV engine? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, I think I have to wait another 10 seconds because we're at like a 20-second delay. Yeah, you'll probably get a soft Kent today. I mean, a lot of you will probably get all 4 of these correct, if I'm honest with you. All right. All right. Yeah, there's actually a bunch of people guessing. Oh, I should make a rule. Try not to look at the chat either, in case you see a bunch of answers, you know, kind of asking the audience and therefore not knowing yourself. Try to avoid that temptation. But all right, I think everybody's finished. So the correct answer is D, Clement Foucault, I think is how you pronounce it. But yeah, I was trying to find for sure who was the creator of EV, just like everyone knows Brecht von Lommel did cycles. It was hard to find Clement. I couldn't find that explicitly stated anywhere. I had to. He's part of the original team, and he was responsible in that blog article from the Blender development team. He is the PBR. He's doing all the PBR stuff with the new Viewport team, and so pretty certain that Clement is the creator, and most of you seem to know that as well. So yeah, that is Clement Foucault, I think. Foucault. I'm butchering it, I'm sure. All right, next one. So D is the correct answer. Foucault. Clement Foucault. Thank you. Next question. Clement Foucault. That helps a lot. Number 2, which of these nodes does currently function within Eevee? A, pointiness, B, bevel, or C, ambient occlusion? See, people should be getting this pretty easily. Oh, let me count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let those guesses filter in, but if you guys remember what Pavel said earlier on, and if you just paid attention to the last like 5-10 minutes, this should be an easy one. And remember that which of these does currently function? Yeah, there you go, Miranda. Yukina, I saw you. I do need a little jingle, don't I? Like a Jeopardy equivalent. All right, I think. All right, yeah. So Pavel, you dropped this answer really early on, and pointiness does not work, bevel does not work, but ambient occlusion does work. We just saw that in the last few minutes. I assume everything will work eventually, because pointiness, like, that's a pretty important one. Also, you can get some interesting edge detection from the bevel the bevel node. We had a tutorial about that on our site recently, so kind of an improved pointiness. So yeah, anyway, that's answer C. Let's go on to the next one, number 3. What's the key condition for a procedural wood texture to look right? A sine wave texture instead of the saw. That's the different methods for the wave texture. B, orientation of the object in the z-axis. C, proper UV layout. D, generated UV coordinates. All right, I'm going to count, or I should just come up with a jingle. What is the one that Wayne did? I wish I knew the words to the song. I think that's been 10 seconds. He's a better singer than me. So the answer, let me let those filter in. If you guys were paying attention to the stream, I did say this several times. I probably beat it to death. Judging by the answers, I did beat it to death. That's music. All right, I think that's all the answers that come in. I think every single person got it right. Yes, the answer was B, the object orientation. That was crucial for the object for the material to work properly. So you guys all know that. I'll make you one. Yeah, you should. David, if you make me a little jingle, I think I'm coordinated enough to always play that in the in this answer guessing 10 seconds. So if you want to do that, that'd be pretty great. Oh, the girl from Ipanema. I saw people guessing that. I haven't heard that song in forever. I need to go check. I assume that is where he kind of got the melody from. All right, I think there's just one more. Then I'll let you go. I've bored you enough. Number 4. Kent thinks he found an EV setting that has been slowing everything down. Which one is it? A, ambient occlusion. B, bloom. C, depth of field. D, screen space reflections. In hindsight, it's weird creating these. Just assume that I'm counting as I'm talking here. But I create these quizzes like ahead of time, hoping that I will cover all these parts. And now it's like, wow, this is the easiest quiz I've ever made. So I need to get better at making quizzes, I think. Yeah, I think you all got this. Pretty easy. Maybe only the first or second question stumped anybody. I want all of you guys to succeed, but I also want to be known as someone who makes difficult quizzes, stuff you have to really think about. So I'm glad you guys all won. All right, that is the answer, screen space reflections. I could have sworn that's what had been. I did some fairly extensive testing with recording through OBS, and that was, at least in the scenes I worked with earlier, an issue. But maybe it's not. I don't know. Maybe Eevee's getting better. Maybe my computer's improving itself. I don't know. But another thing about the last time I did Eevee was with that vehicle, and it was really highly subdivided. So a ton of geometry was going on in the scene. That I can say with certainty is a problem. But that's going to be it for today. Thank you guys. If you got all 4 correct, I'm too soft. I'm going to go back and give you all your points, whether it's 3. Don't say winner unless you want to. Just say how many you got correct out of 4. Golly, who's making the slideshow? Not even getting the right number of questions. Say how many you got out of 4, and I will go through, give you guys XP. Thank you for joining me today in the live stream. Hope you guys learned something. And I will see you next week. Let's see here. Also, one last thing. I do want to ask you, I need to get serious about recording the fundamental courses. We're going to do fundamentals of modeling with 2.8, texturing with 2.8, shading with 2.8, lighting, rigging, and animation. Those are the 6 that we are trying to actively work on before we get to release 2.8. So I'm thinking the only practical way to do that is to not stream in, or at least for me, not to stream in March. So I've got streams scheduled for the rest of this month, but then I might have to take another break. I'm thinking I'm going to have to take another break in March just so I can focus on recording. I guess I'm just letting you guys know that. I hope we can still be friends if I don't stream for the month of March. But just wanted to fill you guys in. If you don't see the calendar fill up, that's the reason. All right, so that's it. Awesome. Peter, congrats on winning. I like that you also typed in winner. So thanks, guys. I will see you later. See you next week. And goodbye.